Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. Thank you so much for asking me to speak. Girls Right Now is an organization I have long admired, and I'm especially thrilled to be hearing the next generation of women readers read from their work tonight. My hope is that what I say here may be encouraging, because I think that's really what all writers need. And I love the word itself, encouraging, because it has the word courage in it. And the word courage is derived from the French word cœur, meaning heart. Courage takes heart, a big, bold heart, and it is my hope that what I say here may, as my 5-year-old daughter puts it, bigify your hearts. The first thing I want to say is that I feel so grateful that I found writing. It was something from the beginning that was truly mine, that I could claim and explore in secret on my own. And that thrill of discovery in and through writing is a joy that continues to enrich my life immeasurably. But I know that you girls already know that. You already feel that, and that is why you are here. So I thought what might be most helpful is if I, as someone who is simply farther down the road, would share with you some of the less spiritual, more concrete joys of writing that I have found, so that that may support your decision to devote yourselves fully to it. So I want to say, devoting yourself to writing can bring many gifts. One is that you can meet new people. When I was a little older than the mentees here in my first year of college at Ohio State University, I participated in one of my first poetry readings. It was put on by the English department. I was a new student, I didn't know anyone, but all you had to do to participate was sign up, so I did. I was primarily writing poems at this time, and a lot of my poems had to do with struggling with what it meant to be a young woman. For this reading, I chose a poem called On Vogue. And although I don't have the poem or remember it, I do know that it presented my views that Vogue magazine was not a particularly helpful text for me in this quest. As part of my presentation, I wore a cardigan sweater turned backwards so the buttons went up the back. It should be noted that I had recently graduated from a Catholic high school where I had to wear a uniform every day, and I was still getting my sea legs in terms of this whole dressing up thing, and that my sweater was perhaps less cutting-edge fashionable than I thought. At any rate, as I marched up to the lectern, very nervous with my poem in hand, I did not know that the audience that seemed full of strangers in fact contained my future husband, the father of my 3 children, and that today, when people ask us how we met, he will say that his first glimpse of me was reading a poem with my sweater on backwards. So I'm here to testify that putting your work out there can indeed bring great rewards. I can also attest to the fact that writing can take you places. After I graduated from college, I was fortunate enough to continue my writing in a master's program at another school. Once I graduated from there, though, I felt lost. I still considered myself to be a writer, but I didn't understand how I was supposed to go from being a person who wrote a lot to a person who wrote books, which was something I wanted to do. I was still writing primarily poetry at this time, and it seemed like I was supposed to be submitting my poems to these small scholarly journals that were associated with colleges and universities. But I balked at this because I didn't feel connected to these publications. I would see them for sale in the bookstore. They were always somber and expensive and did not look like fun at all, and no young person I knew read them. The idea that I was supposed to pursue the approval of the editors there seemed depressing. This was in the 1990s, and when I went to what was then called the record store, I saw that people were making little Xeroxed magazines called zines about music and other fun topics. They were sometimes only 12 or 16 pages long with 2 staples for a spine. This seemed to me like a much better use of my energy publishing-wise, and I quickly went to work writing, illustrating, and laying out a zine of my own, which I called Bunny Rabbit. I walked around the city asking stores if they would carry it until I sold it at 5 or 6 stores. I was still struggling with the idea of what it meant to be a woman, and although I gave my zine a soft, cuddly title, I didn't want it to be a soft, cuddly zine. In a move akin to putting my sweater on backwards, I cut out and pasted a small piece of sandpaper to each cover of Bunny Rabbit. It was like Pat the Bunny with an edge, I thought. So here I was, living in New York, working at various desk jobs where I pretended to work but actually wrote poems. And I was doing this Bunny Rabbit thing, gluing my bits of sandpaper on my covers. And I was pretty sure Hemingway hadn't exactly started this way, but whatever. It felt good, so I continued. And then one day I got a call from the guy at Tower Records where Bunny Rabbit was sold, and he said that they wanted to distribute Bunny Rabbit internationally. So the bunny rabbits I made at my kitchen table and pasted with rubber cement and took to be published at Village Copier ended up for sale on shelves in South Korea and Japan. I must say, my parents were sort of befuddled by this activity, visiting my apartment with my reams of paper and my cases of glue stick. Here I am in New York City, I told them, a published author. And I believed this. And this is what I am also here to tell you, which is that writing can make your dreams come true. I was going along like this, still writing, and now it's the early 2000s, and the internet is really happening, and Dave Eggers' book, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, came out, and he started his publishing company, McSweeney's, and they had a website where interesting things were being posted. So I followed it, and one day they posted that they were holding a contest for someone to write a book about electrical engineering on boats. All you had to do was write a short book proposal and email it in. This, to me, is how every literary submission should be framed. You are not submitting your work to a journal for possible rejection. You are entering a contest, and maybe you will win. Anyway, I am not so good at submitting my work, but I am good at entering contests. So I entered, and I got an email in return. We like your proposal. Go ahead, write that book. If I could say anything to the girls tonight who are doing the incredibly important work of recognizing that their writing is their own and no one else's, and that listening to themselves closely and fearlessly and struggling to bring what they hear into the world is a vocation that requires a warrior heart. If I could, and I will, say anything to you powerful girls, it is this. Your voice matters. Your consciousness, your perception, your feeling, your thoughts matter. Your writing, which is yours and yours alone, is sacred and worth devoting yourself wholly to, and worth putting your clothes on wrong for, if that's what you feel is right. If I could say anything to the mentees tonight that I hope will stick, it would be this. Go ahead, write that book. Thank you. So I am a little weepy this week, but I have an excuse. It's not my period. And even if it was, that's okay. I finished this manuscript for this book that I'm working on for a very long time called Savage Park, and I turned it in on Monday. And I was looking, thank you. I'm excited. And I was looking forward to this week of taking naps and eating donuts, and that's not exactly what happened. But in any case, I do have a galley of this book, and this is my first public reading from it, so I'm thrilled to share this with this community that I feel a part of and that is so supportive. So Savage Park is about a playground in Japan. It's an adventure playground, and without going too deep, adventure playgrounds are playgrounds that were created by a landscape architect in Copenhagen in 1943 when that town was under German occupation. And the idea of an adventure playground is that it just contains a landscape with donated scraps and a play worker who is there to oversee children and not direct their play. And the playground that I went to and worked at in Japan is one where children are encouraged to play with the 4 elements, including fire, and where they play with hammers and saws and hole punchers and make amazing things and sit in trees. And I was very inspired and moved by this space. And so the title of my book, Savage Park, has this clunky subtitle that I'm proud of, which is A Meditation on Play, Space, and Risk for Americans Who Are Nervous, Distracted, and Afraid to Die. And the short passage that I'll read to you is, I'm describing following my mentor, my employer for the time I was there. Her name is Noriko. And she took me on my final day in Japan to what was to be a pop-up playground where we basically showed up with, our backpacks and were supposed to make a playground out of whatever we found there. And miraculously this happened, and this is a little description of what I experienced. It was my last day in Tokyo, and Noriko was taking me to another park, to a workshop she was running there. She was going to lead a group of volunteers in making a pop-up adventure playground. I thought it was odd that we weren't taking any tools or other materials with us, but Noriko told me there would be things to work with at the park. She shouldered her cloth backpack, and off we went. The park we arrived at was a somewhat depressing grassy acre in what was essentially a traffic rotary in the shadow of a giant apartment building. On one side, it was bordered by a highway, and on the other side by a street that served as an artery between the highway and the building. The only pieces of play equipment there were a metal swing set with one broken swing and a concrete ramp about 6 feet high that seemed meant to be a slide, although I couldn't imagine it being welcoming to anyone's bottom. In one corner of the park, there was a storage shed similar to what one sees in the yards of suburban homes in America. What we were going to use to make the playground was in the storage shed, Noriko told me. It took a while to figure out how to get in. When Noriko finally located the key and opened the shed, I was surprised. I had expected tools, but there were only a couple of tires, a dolly, some mats, rope, and a few logs that had been sliced in half. There were about a half dozen volunteers already gathered when we arrived at the park. The number had grown to about a dozen by the time we got the shed open. My understanding was that we had about an hour and a half before crowds of people would begin arriving to play. I did not see how we were going to be able to construct anything meaningful with what we had in 90 minutes. Noriko began by having all of us walk around the park and pick up any sharp or dangerous objects, and while doing so, we were to take note of the landscape, of any interesting features, and of any opportunities for play, given the aforementioned materials we were going to be working with. We did this for about 20 minutes and then regrouped to compare notes. It was decided pretty quickly that we would build 2 structures out of rope: a swing, which would be suspended between two trees, and a monkey bridge or climbing structure made of 2 parallel lines of rope placed horizontally, like railroad tracks between 2 other trees. The tires would be offered to children to roll down the concrete ramp, and the mats would be placed to the side of the ramp so that children would climb up the ramp and jump off it. We would leave the dolly out and see if children wanted to push one another around on it. By the time people arrived to play, not much was done beyond half of the rope swing hanging limply on one tree. This sad start had taken almost a full hour of effort and finally necessitated a rope-tethered rock being thrown precisely between 2 high branches, a feat that took many, many tries. The lack of play apparatus did not seem to matter to those who had come to the event. Mothers appeared with children, blankets, and lunches. They made fires. Tires were rolled down the ramp as anticipated. Leaps were made onto mats. Children sat on the dolly and were pushed pell-mell, screaming by other children. Babies slept. Eventually, the skeleton of the rope swing emerged, looking like a giant pie sign hanging between 2 trees. All that was needed was a seat for the swing. Noriko suggested one of the half logs. Perfect. I felt like it was only good manners to let the many children who had come to play for the day sit on the swing before I went. And indeed, the line for the swing formed almost immediately and didn't abate until late afternoon. But at last, not long before we took it down, I had my turn on the swing. The log seat was low to accommodate the small children who were there, and it was even lower with my weight, but still it held me. And I backed up until I was on my tiptoes, as tall as I could possibly make myself, like a ballerina on point, and then I picked up my feet and let go. I flew between the trees. I flew gently, easily, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to fly, as if flying were easy, as if the trees themselves, the generous, benevolent trees, wanted nothing more than to encourage me in this act. And as I was there, flying while sitting on the seat, which was also the tree, knowing that the swing was going to be disassembled momentarily, knowing that the whole thing was going to be over in a minute, as the sun was going down, as the sun was going to be gone, as it was going to get so dark, it would be as if the sun had never been there in the first place. And all this knowing swinging combined to make me feel like I was bobbing around in a tree womb, where what a tree was and is constantly transforming, a type of supernatural plastic. And I too could be like this, could be anything and go anywhere from here. Thank you so much. There we go. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce the first reader of the night, Tia Marie Gaston.